everyone, I'm Thea, and today I will be talking about one of my favorite, or in fact my favorite, YA book fantasy series, The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. So the series consists of 4 books: The Raven Boys, The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and The Raven Cycle. The series begins with the protagonist Blue as she meets these 4 boys, Genzi, Adam, Ronan, and Noah, who go to an all-boys private school in her town of Henrietta, Virginia. So at first she absolutely despises these boys because, as Blue says herself, she has 2 rules. Stay away from Raven boys, who are the kind of boys who are the boys that go to Aglion Academy. The Raven is sort of their mascot, so they're all called Raven boys. And stay away from boys. Stay away from Aglion boys because they're bastards, and stay away from boys because they're trouble. So Blue breaks this rule in almost like the first chapter from her point of view, other than the prologue. So clearly that didn't stick. But the series follows these 5 as they find Glendower, who is a Welsh king known to grant wishes. It was originally Genzi's passion project, and he sort of roped everybody else into being a part of it. And while the characters feel so raw and real, the plot itself is so whimsical and it's like kind of absurd. Like, if you think about, I feel like The Raven Cycle is one of those books that is unspoilable. Like, I could tell you any event that happens in the story and you would think it's absurd until you read the book and you come to that point and it fits in seamlessly. It's such a strange narrative, and not strange in a bad way. It's so unique and different. Not different as in the structure, while the structure is pretty different. It's just the ideas that Maggie Stiefvater has are so wild that it adds to this fever dream-like sequence that the second you close the book, you don't remember anything that happened. You can remember the characters, how the book made you feel, but not, as I was saying, the plot is so unique that you genuinely you close the book and then you forget everything that happens, and every time you decide to reread the series, it's like, how did I forget this? And it's not just like to some plot points you're like, how did I forget this? Every single event that happens, you're like, oh my god, I literally have no recollection of this happening. And it's such a common thing to see in the fandom on Pinterest and Tumblr as well. It's like everybody agrees that it's so strange, and that is what makes it so unique. It's like something I haven't seen in any other series that I've read so far. The characters are all so raw and real. Each one of them feels so well written and human. They all have individual voices, so you can tell even without the title on at the top of each chapter that tells you whose perspective it is. You can tell because of how unique their voices are. Especially the fact that they all have such real and human flaws about them. It makes their character and even the relationships they have with other people so authentic. And something that I really love about it is that none of the characters' flaws exist in a void. They have impact, really big impact on their relationships with everybody around them. So each character, all of their relationships feel so dynamic. And because different characters, obviously they have different traits, so it makes there's something special about each relationship. And this isn't like one of those stories where some of the characters, like one specific pair, like never interact, or one pair is always talking. You never see that in this story. All of the characters, they're so well-rounded. They have conversations with each other. You can tell that each pair and each group in the friendship circle has a special and unique bond, and I think that's what makes the characters so special to the reader, because they genuinely feel like they are a part of what's going on, especially because there's so many things like inside jokes and things that we as the reader don't know about, but give us an insight into how close the friendship is between the characters. Also, another thing I really liked about the story is how the relationship, the conflict that each character has does in fact affect the plot. It's not like the plot is going on one tangent and then we have the characters and their relationships on one side. They both are so intertwined, and influence each other to such a magnitude that it feels real. Everything about it feels so authentic. In fact, there is actually a sequel series called the Dreamer Trilogy that I haven't read, and honestly I'm not planning on reading because I like the ending of the Raven Cycle so much. I don't want to read the Dreamer Trilogy. Also because I know that the characters are all adults, and something about it, I don't particularly enjoy reading adult characters. I prefer book, especially only in my fantasy series actually, do I prefer where the characters are teenagers. Maybe because I am 16 years old, I feel more connected, and I better enjoy reading characters who are in high school. Also because there seems to be some sort of strange like emptiness when reading about characters as they're drifted apart. When they were such a close-knit group beforehand, reading about them as they've split from the rest of the group, and after in college when they all leave their small town, it's sort of really empty, and I don't enjoy that feeling, so I particularly don't plan on reading the sequel series. There is a short story called Opal that comes after book 4. I considered not reading that, but then I did because, I mean, it's a really short series, and even that, which features the characters Adam and Ronan as they're sort of preparing to part ways for a bit, it feels very hollow, and there's something that's so opposite from the Raven Cycle about it. While I did enjoy the insight into their lives, it feels so opposite from the feeling the Raven Cycle gave that I don't feel like reading the sequel series. I mean, I rationally know that it's something that people do as they grow older and go their different ways, but something about like, I don't like it happening in my fiction, and especially because of things that the characters went through, it feels like they shouldn't, but realistically I know they should. It's a whole thing, and I don't plan on reading it. I might a really long time in the future, so I'm still not like looking at spoilers or anything, which I do when I'm fully sure that I won't read a series, but I don't plan on reading it anytime soon. And I can acknowledge that the Raven Cycle isn't a perfect series. There are some things about the plot. One thing that really disappointed me is that it felt sort of anticlimactic, and while I know that it does sort of serve as to give a message, it's not really the plot that felt anticlimactic, it's the pacing. I feel like the last book especially, some of the pacing threw me off, and I know I don't think the Raven Cycle is one of the best book series I've read. I only feel like it's my favorite because of the way the characters and the plot and the atmosphere made me feel. So it's certainly not the best book series out there, and I don't claim it to be. I just think I really like it I'm not sure actually, I just really like it because of its atmosphere, and I feel like there's something more to that, but I can't really put my finger on it. It's a mix of everything. It feels like the perfect mix of relatable characters that you can get attached to, with a plot that's so unique, and it makes sense. It's so logical. Even though you don't know all of the twists and turns, you don't know the magic of the book because the characters are discovering it as it go. I never stopped and thought, wait, this makes no sense. As well as the atmosphere that gives you like this imagery of such a perfect place. Those combined makes this one of my favorite book series. Now that like you've heard what the book is about and sort of what the book entails, what you can expect, I think you should decide whether or not you should read the book. There's some books like Bunny by Mona Awad that some people either absolutely love or absolutely hate. I don't think the Raven Cycle is like that. I think even if everything didn't appeal to you, there are some parts of the story that everybody can find, or almost everybody can find something in. So I think definitely you should give it a try, especially if you are into character-driven plots and young adult fantasy novels. So if you have already read the Raven Cycle, or you will read it and want more books that are kind of like it, even though no book is I don't think I've ever read a book that reminded me of the Raven Cycle. It's just some parts of the book that feel like some parts of other books. So here are some of my recommendations. Number 1 is the Six of Crows duology. This is probably one of my other favorite YA fantasy series. I don't think I read something with such intricate character development. This, I think, is the closest in terms of characters to the Raven Cycle. Not the characters themselves, but how the bonds between the characters work. The setting is completely different though. This takes place in a completely fictional setting with a more rigid magical system that you're already pretty much aware of. While it does add on that, it's a lot different. The whole atmosphere is much grimmer and it is more of dark fantasy. Also, it features a cast of more morally great characters than the Raven Cycle, where you can pretty much tell that the characters are meant to be good people. We see more morally great characters with questionable decisions, who I love very, very much. I love these characters so much, oh my god. And then another thing that's similar is the fact that they go on missions. While the cast of the Raven Cycle is going on missions to find Glendower, this focuses more on heists, and the stakes are much, much higher. The next one I want to recommend, it's not a book series, it's more of a comic or like online webcomic thing. It's called School Bus Graveyard. I think this might be the most similar to the Raven Boys. It also features a cast of characters, this time in rural Georgia, and they happen to meet for the first time in school for a school project, and they get thrust into this world of strange creatures. It's a lot darker than the Raven Cycle, but it also, half of the time they're in this fantasy world and the other half of the series are in the actual world, and when they're in the actual world, their interactions and the things they do feel very reminiscent of the things or the activities that the Raven Cycle gang does together, and I really like that. I also find all of the characters really likable, and they're also unique in their own ways again, just like the Raven Cycle, and I think this is definitely the closest I found to the Raven Cycle. The third series I want to suggest is the Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare. While it does also follow, I have only the last book here because I read the other two online, and while it does also follow characters who are pretty young and in a magical world, it's a much more defined magic system. Also, the characters, I personally didn't like how it ended. This book, the last book, I really liked the first two. I didn't like how it ended, and for me it really felt flat. It's not something I feel like made the things before that much worth it, and I personally have really mixed feelings about this book. But if you want more of a light read and you don't really care for really intricate plot development, the characters are all unique, they're likable, for me personally, I didn't like all of them, but there's so many characters, you will find some that fit your taste, and it was enjoyable to an extent. It wasn't like overly horrible that I couldn't stand to read it. I did finish it, and I think it does work. It's not that bad. This is probably the farthest from the Raven Cycle that I can think of, but it is a little bit reminiscent. They do go on missions, and they have really interesting and wholesome friendships. So that's about as close as I can get to this brilliant series, honestly. The Raven Cycle is unmatched. I don't think I will find anything like it for a really long time. So that's all for today. I hope you like my rant about this book series, and I'll see you next time.